I know a lot of your listeners, they're looking at coming into the IT industry.
Yeah.
And I would like to have just take a look at the enterprise computing, look at the mainframe world and see if that is of interest to you, because it is a different type of mentality and the
Mm.
job is a little bit different, but it's very rewarding.
Welcome, everyone, to the Tech Guide podcast, where we give actual advice to those wanting to break into tech or are looking for their next gig. We have Marna Walle on the podcast today, talk about a really cool subject. So welcome, Marna. Super excited to have you on today.
Oh, and Ryan, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Before we dive into the nitty gritty of mainframes, which our conversation will be about, and I'm super excited to talk about, I want to talk about your love for technology and where it comes from. I feel like everyone that works in tech, works on these amazing devices, has some sort of story about when they fell in love with technology. Is there an instance for you when you fell in love with technology?
Well, that's a really good question. My family tends to be fairly technical. I'm from a family of engineers, but that's not they're more mechanical and physical engineer.
Yeah.
But me, I view myself as a software engineer, so I'm a little bit different than the rest of my family.
Yep.
I think I really got the bug. I think I really got the interest when I really started doing some programming in high school. A little bit late because I know a lot of people do it earlier than that, but I really enjoyed it. And then when I went to college, I'm like, I really like algorithms and solving things and writing my own stuff to solve my own problems. I thought that was interesting. So I think I kind of grabbed onto it at that point. And then I just started looking at things and I thought, man, I like the big stuff. I like the big problems.
Yep.
I like solving things that are very important to many different people. And I thought, this is mainframes. I think that's where I want to go. And then out of college, when I joined in the mainframe community, I thought, man, this is just great. This is a whole career right in front of me right here. And that's what I
Yes.
really love. So yeah, kind of got stuck right about then.
I really love that. And I wouldn't say stuck, but you definitely chose a career that you do love because you've been a software engineer now with IBM for 34 years working on mainframes. Before we dive into like the mainframe environment, like what this really means, can we talk about just at the very basic level, like what is a mainframe?
So mainframes are, and especially at IBM, one of the premier operating systems that we have on the mainframe. Mainframes are very just large systems that are meant to be up for very long periods of time, 24
Mm.
7, 365, right? So we have a workhorse operating system that has been around for, oh gosh, I probably should know this, 50 years maybe, but it's had a couple of different brandings of it. So the current brand name is ZOS, and I started out on what was called MVS at the time, and it has been rebranded and upgraded. So even though it's a very old operating system, it has been enhanced and modernized for a long time. And then many people in your audience might be interested to know it's a Unix operating system. It has been
Mm.
certified that it's Unix. So you have other Unix platforms. We are a Unix platform, ZOS. So it's kind of interesting that we've got Unix within our operating system as well. But anyway, what we can do is we can run the world's business, right? And that's exactly what we do. So we will run financial transactions. We run in 45 of the top 50 world banks. We run in
Wow.
67 of the Fortune 500 companies. We're in 8 of the top 10 insurers worldwide, 4 to the 5 top airlines. So, I mean, this is just stuff that's just been
Oh,
around forever and it runs and it stays up. Every time you swipe your passport when you come into the America, you're running on a mainframe. Every time you use your credit card, back end of it is going through a mainframe. So
that's
you may not know it, but it is a really important part of everyday life and everyday transactions that we have. And that's what I've loved doing it. So that's what the mainframe does. It pretty much, you know, helps our daily life become modern.
yeah. And so, like I said before, I'm going to ask some silly questions, but just to break this down a little bit further. So, is the mainframe an actual hardware device or is it the software that
Yeah.
is like running?
So the mainframe itself is a very large server, like our premier server right now. The one it's our most recent one that's in the marketplace is called the Z16. And
Okay.
that has a lot of very modern capabilities. So we can do things like very high end, fast encryption on it, which is very important
Interesting.
for those banks and those financial and those healthcare companies that need encryption. We also can do other latest machine has the integrated accelerator for AI. So now we're
Yeah.
talking about high throughput, low latency through that hardware machine itself so that we can do deep learning and machine learning on it. And we can do inferencing during the scoring of transactions to make sure Was that credit card that's getting swiped? Is that really you, or could
That
that be
you.
somebody else coming in, right? We can do that in real time. You stick your chip into the thing at the grocery store
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
waits a second. That's going through a mainframe to make sure it makes it sound like it's a reasonable transaction to do. So it is hardware. And then on top of that hardware, we can run various operating systems, right? So I talked a little bit about
That's
I
so
work
cool.
on ZOS, but you can also run Linux on the operating system, and we have other operating systems as well. So for me, the mainframe is the hardware itself, and then I work on the ZOS operating system portion of it where it runs all those business transactions and things like that.
That is so cool. And like I said before we got this started, this was going to be like someone we have not had on the podcast before. So I'm super excited to now that we got those foundations down, we can talk
Yeah.
about the mainframe a little bit more. So let's talk about your role in like the day to day. You're obviously solving like
Yeah.
huge problems. Like you just listed a ton of stats of like all these organization, banks, health systems. Everyone's using these mainframes. So
Yeah.
can you tell us, oops, excuse me, can you tell us a little bit more about like what your role is from a day to day basis? I'm sure
Yeah.
it changes a lot, but at the foundational level.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I came out of college, I really liked this role, and I've actually kind of stayed in this basic kind of role my whole
So
career, and I've
cool.
I've
Yeah.
really loved it. So I work in the development organization of the ZOS operating system, and I specialize mostly in the tasks that a system programmer would do. Now,
Okay.
a ZOS system programmer is somebody that would actually upgrade the software or put the software on new hardware levels, or they would add new functions. They would implement new functions, I guess, within an organization to turn on new
Yeah.
capabilities, making sure that the system is serviced, making sure that if there's any patches that need to go on, you know how to get it on. We're
Yeah.
responsible for keeping the system up all the time, all the time. So we
That's
do things like set it up in a clustered environment so that we can take one piece of the cluster down while we're rolling other things across, keeping the workload up itself, right, while we're moving things underneath. So the system programmer has a lot of responsibility for actually doing the care and feeding of that mainframe operating system. And I've really just enjoyed doing it because it is it's good, challenging, technical work, and it seems like the job's never done.
yeah. So when you talk about like the technical problems, like the challenges that come with it, is it like bugs coming up in like the program or like what are some like the challenges that come with it?
That's what I love about a system programmer. Every time you come into work, it's a different problem that day, right?
I
So
like
it
that.
might be that you're dealing with a defect that you need to either fix forward or you need to remove and go back to a level that's stable. It might be that your management has come down and said, okay, we have to start using higher levels of encryption on this type of database because the security officer says we're not encrypting at a high enough level or
Yeah.
something like that. So all of a sudden you might be thrown new functions that you have to implement. You might come into work and found like the log4j problem was
Yeah.
already cropped up inside the world, and now you have to go patch a lot of your systems in a day or two or something like that. So it could be almost anything, but it really, in general, is just making sure those systems stay up and running and that workload can just stay and pump and can get through every transaction that it has to.
I am curious. Basically what I'm trying to ask here is like what were some of the challenges like how have you seen yourself grown? Is this a steep learning curve to like
Yeah.
learn all of this or like yeah, like how's your learning or development
Oh,
when you started?
when I joined 34 years ago, it was a very steep learning curve,
Yeah.
but and it took me a while to become even productive. But you know what? You started in this area, you kind of learned that area, and then you started growing and expanding, and you would get
Yeah.
deeper skills, and then you just start expanding out. Like when we added Unix into the operating system, I was really interested in that because I thought Unix was, modern at the time.
Yeah.
And so I'd learn all the Unix sides of it, right? And some people maybe were not so interested in the Unix side, so that gave me a spot to go and be my own, right? So I thought
Interesting.
that was pretty good. There was Unix people doing it, but not everybody was interested in it. And so I thought, wow, this is a really good area, niche area for me to really jump into it. But it is. When I started off, it was a pretty steep learning curve. But nowadays it's not that steep to get in. And I know a lot of your listeners, they're looking at coming into the IT
Yeah.
industry. And I would like to have just take a look at the enterprise computing, look at the mainframe world and see if that is of interest to you because it is a different type of mentality and the
Mm.
job is a little bit different, but it's very rewarding. So we have things that we've built up within the mainframe community that we can help the people that want to come on board.
Interesting.
So we have things like at ibm.biz/Z community, there's
Hmm.
learning and education that you can do there. There's badges that you can get. Badges are pretty exciting if you want to get
Yeah.
employed by somebody and they're looking for a skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got skills build.org, which is another area where if you're a high school or a college or even a retrainee, somebody that's coming from another industry and wants to look at IT, they can come into there. And then
Interesting.
we also have apprenticeship programs where you can buddy up with somebody. You don't even need a college degree. And
Interesting.
we could train you and see if you like this environment of large scale computing or enterprise computing. So there's a lot of people that want to help people that want to
Yeah.
join or at least learn about it to see if they want to join it later.
Yeah.
So there's
I
plenty of things to do now. They weren't there 30 years ago, though.
I was gonna say, I feel like that's just like a trend throughout like everything. Like the resources to actually succeed entry level is there's just way more out there. I do want to ask, I am curious about a part that you just said. It's a different mentality and like
Mhm.
different challenges. Why is it a different mentality and like different challenge? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's been kind of interesting. I'm going to speak as a female now because 34
Yeah.
years ago, there weren't a whole lot of females that were going into the mainframe, right? So that was a little bit challenging coming up. But I
Interesting.
just came back from a tech exchange conference in Las Vegas that IBM had put on. And I was looking around and I was like thinking, this is like half female now. This is wonderful. So it is a different
That's awesome.
mentality. And I think as we have more females coming into the industry, and even in the mainframe specifically, I think people are accepting a little bit more of us, which is really good. And we're proving
Yeah.
ourselves and we know that we can do it too, right? So that's been kind of interesting too. So I've seen it turn a little bit differently in that area too.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I want to talk then I want to go back to, of course, all like the resources that you laid out there. So do you need a formal degree or does a formal degree help to get into mainframes or how would you? Yeah.
No, not necessarily at all. So like we have like an apprenticeship program where we know that a lot of people maybe a college degree is not in their cards.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't, and that's totally fine because these new collar type of jobs, if you have the skill and you have the desire to learn, right? So if you think that this is interesting and you really try and put an effort and you really want to succeed, you will, right? And so you don't need to have that college degree if you want to go through something like the apprenticeship program. And there have been graduates of the apprenticeship program that are absolutely wonderful. I met an
Wow.
IBM champion. Those are the ones that are our mainframe key, let's say cheerleaders
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the mainframe operating system. And a lot of them, they don't have college degrees. They've come, they've learned, they've stayed, became part of the community. They're very welcome and we welcome them and they welcome us to because they learn from us and we learn
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
them. Right. So it's all walks of life where there's spots in this because it's such a big industry that there's a lot of things that really anybody can do and specialize in any of the many, many, many different parts of the mainframe.
That's what so we've had of course, we've had a few people on in, like, the IT world here, and that's what I think is, like, so cool about the IT space is that, like, there are, like, so many resources for people to get in. Like, you don't need a formal degree to get into these. You just need to go through, like, an apprenticeship program or just learn on your own, and that's, like, a great way to break into the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And the advent of these badges, I mean, people know when you have badges and they know what badge skills they're kind of looking at because within the mainframe, there's so many different
Yeah.
archetypes or different job roles security admin, or network administrators, data scientists, hardware engineers, software engineers, system programmers, kind of
So
like me.
many.
And there's so many of these, and they all have their own badges, and then when
Yeah.
someone's looking for employment or something, the employers say, I need this kind of a badge, let me see who's out there," right? But to get those
Interest
badges, you can do the free education, you can do the apprenticeship program, you can do self-learning, you can do anything you want, right?
Is there a specific badge that you would recommend people to, like, always have on, like, their resume or, like, is that a way to approach it
Oh,
or
boy. That's a tough question. I wish I
Yeah.
would've knew that ahead of time. I would have had a couple of badges on my list. Um I don't have any right now on my hand that I can come up at the top of my mind. I could go on and see I could list a couple of the badges that I have, and those are probably pretty much, for the system programmer, at least, that would be in there. But remember, for every discipline, there would
Yeah.
be their own set of badges, right?
For sure. Well, can you go through your badges then? Because I know people you're very enthusiastic, I would be like, you know what you're talking about. So someone might be listening, be like, well, I'm just gonna get to the badges she has. So like, what are the badges that you have?
I've got a bunch of ZOS system programmer badges. I've got a couple mainframe badges. I've got some oh gosh, I'm trying to remember some subsystem badges, I think, for maybe middleware applications. I've got some Rex programming badge, I think. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the specific names, but those would be kind of the areas where the skill would be into that area if you were interested in being a system programmer.
And just to relay this back to you, those badges indicate to potential employers, like, I went through this program
Yeah.
and these are the skills that I got. And so I don't have this 4-year degree, but I have these badges here to prove that I can do this.
Exactly, exactly, and you know the work. You've taken the tests or done the classes and the quizzes or proven by writing the programs or whatever you have to do for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
badge, right? You've shown that you're proving that you've got those skills to do it.
And I do want to talk about the mainframes as itself. There's a lot of trendy topics out there right now, something called AI that everyone is talking
Mm,
about. I'm curious, like, what has been the approach in the mainframe environment when it comes to AI the past like 2 years, year, even the past like six
yeah.
months?
Well, we're absolutely embracing it, and we're embracing it in a couple different ways. One of them is that we want to be able to provide to the workload that runs on the mainframe the capability to drive AI, right? So, as I'd
Mhm.
mentioned in our latest level of the hardware server, we have the integrated accelerator for AI, which is that on chip inference accelerator so that you can run those
Yeah.
transactions and do those AI inferences right in time, in scale on the transaction. But then the second piece that we're doing and embracing on the mainframe is because it's hard to manage, right? This is a big system. It's been
Yeah.
around for a long time. There's a many, many, many different pieces of it, right? So we need to move into AI for the operations itself so that we can have AI help, let's say, the system programmer do better management of the system so that we
Mm.
could eventually be able to say, hey, with my AI assistant or framework that we would have, help me manage the system so that I don't have to do so much day to day hands on keyboard. I'm going to let eventually more AI operations take care of it. And I can just
Yeah.
babysit or watch it or advise it or just run a simulation, see if it would do what I would do and to the point where I want to trust it. Trust isn't going to come overnight on some of these machines that are up all the time, but it's good to start for the operations side of it because everybody needs help during their job with AI. So that's kind of the two ways that we're definitely embracing AI on the mainframe.
So are people in the mainframe environment worried at all about like everyone's talking about like, oh, AI is going to take my job, AI is going to take my job. Like, what is the general consensus in the
Uh,
mainframe environment?
I think the people that I've at least talked to say,
Yeah.
I know I need to be around, but I need more help. I can't be
Mm.
everywhere every time. I can't look at all those reports. I can't assimilate all that much data anymore. I need tools to help me do that. And then the tools can help me perhaps make a decision better on what I should do. But there's just too much data for people to
Yeah.
look at nowadays that all of us need AI in order to help do our jobs. So I don't necessarily think that it some of the more skilled jobs definitely won't be taken away. Some of the rather small jobs, like if you had hired somebody just and their whole job was just to reset a password, that's probably not the job that they're going to be doing their whole life, and an AI could do that fairly easily for you. Someone that's doing more system programming or security administration or network consulting type of things, I think they'll just leverage AI because there's so much data out there that it would be hard to get through that we're going to need AI to help us advise on what we might want to make as a business decision.
I really like that. And yeah, it is using AI to make those business decisions. I feel like everyone, if you're in a sales background, a data background, any background, you are using AI to drive some business decisions at least.
Yeah, there's just too much data out there that we're generating that we can't as a human consume it.
Yeah, I really like that. And so we talked a little bit about AI and like the trends there, but are there any other trends people should know about in like the mainframe that they should just be aware about if they're entering the industry or anything that
Yeah.
comes up?
Well, we've got a couple of other real big strengths in the mainframe. Of course, security, right? We
Mhm.
are what we say is the most securable system in the world, right?
Yeah,
So it's we can configure the operating system such that we are very secure. So we also have things like a ransomware attack. We have things like Cyber Vault, where you can actually take backup copies that are not accessible by people, such that if there was a ransomware attack, we could just go back to a copy and the copy could not have been modified at all.
that's so cool.
So things like that is kind of interesting. And as you've seen in the news, there was a very large casino that I won't mention has been hacked. And we
Mhm.
were just wondering the whole time, well, why didn't they have some of this stuff running on the mainframe? where we could have probably recovered in a lot faster time. So it was just kind
Yeah.
of interesting. I don't know the details of it, but I would think that somebody that was running on a mainframe and had properly secured their system probably would not have had. We don't have to worry as much about that kind of stuff if it's set up
Yeah.
in the correct method.
What I think is so, like, cool about mainframes, like, I never really understood, like, the depth of it, of, like, even, like, a credit card, like, I have to go get groceries after this, like, when I put my chip in, you can bet I'm gonna be thinking about mainframes and all the way, like, it actually impacts me and everyday people.
So yeah, it is. That's why when we got the chips on the credit card in America, I was so happy because Europe had them before we did. But
Yeah,
when we had in there, I was just like, my husband put the credit card in the machine. He was used to it going really fast. I said, "Give it a second. It's got a lot of calculations to do here, right?" And it's going all the way to the back end through a mainframe with
that
all
is
that. It's just
yeah, that is
amazing, and it's just transparent. A lot of people don't even know that today, and so I don't think they really appreciate it enough either.
well, yeah, I was gonna say, I have a new appreciation for it because literally, like, 3 weeks ago, I was, like, checking out at, like, getting groceries or something, I was like, "What does this chip, like, even do?" I
There's a
knew it was
lot of
something
calculations
security.
behind that chip. Yep, yep, yep.
That is so funny. That's awesome. And I want to talk about a little bit more about numbers in a way, because I alluded to it earlier. As we shift here, you've been with IBM for 34 years. Like, what has been the biggest benefit of staying with a company for like so long?
A lot.
Yeah,
Well, I love my job and I love working on ZOS. It's a product that I really am behind. I think the advantage is that I've seen over 34 years this operating system. Like I said, it's a Unix operating system now,
yeah,
right? So we have seen so many advances that come and be able to grow with that and just start kind of when it was much smaller and see where it's blossomed and got out, right? We can even run Linux within an address space on ZOS now with the ZCX technology, right?
so yeah,
So not only are we Unix certified, is that we can actually run, let's say a Docker container, a Linux Docker container on top of ZOS as well. So just to sit around in the same, let's say, relative spot for 34 years, I've been able to just see the amount of workload that we've been able to handle just totally, flatten out to take over a lot of other different types of uh, applications and usages that maybe 34 years ago I wouldn't have even imagined. That we could run a Docker container on
yeah.
ZOS 34 years ago, that would be like, wow, that's incredible. But nope, we're doing it all the time now. We've been doing it for years.
And so it's like, is there like any part of you that like not like kind of like regrets staying with? I mean, obviously not regrets,
Yeah.
but like has ever like wondered like, oh, what would it be like to work for another company? Obviously, you love IBM, you
Yeah,
love what you do, but like,
I don't know. I've had a lot of friends that joined with me and they've moved over to other industries or different
yeah,
platforms and that's fine. But you know what? For me, the people that I work with on my team, and that's the hardware and the software and the firmware folks, they are just wonderfully smart. And
uh,
I don't want to leave here because they're teaching me so much every single day. I love my product. And the people that I work with are just tops. They're absolutely the smartest people I've ever met. And so I'm learning from them every single day. So for me, I didn't necessarily want to ever leave, but I have had people that joined with me 34 years ago or longer, and they've said, "Yeah, I want to go move to something else. I want to go to Google
yeah,
or I want to go to um, Apple or whatever," and that's
mhm,
fine. That's fine. It's a different thing, right? Each his
yeah.
own. I like where I am, so I'm enjoying it here.
And I'm sure you have to like recognize throughout IBM of being like the mainframe like specialist. Like if we have a mainframe question, like go to Marna. Like she'll know what she's doing. I think that's also like another benefit of it. I don't know that for sure, but I would assume that is one.
Yeah, but you know what? When you're on a system as large as this one, you know that there is never one person that can answer
True.
everything, right? So I'll get like sometimes I'll get a really complicated hardware question. I'm like, I think I need to go to a hardware person for that. But the thing that I like about being here for this long is I know the right hardware person to go to, right?
That's awesome.
And so my network is just it's I just great people, smart people, fun people to work with, very
Well,
caring and it's when you work long hours, it's great to be working with people you like.
I like that. I like that a lot. And we'll go to our last segment here. I just want just general advice for like young working professionals. You've obviously had like a great career, but like what are like two or three attributes that have that you would contribute to like your success?
That's a good question. I would say never stop learning new things ever,
Mhm.
right? It's always going to change. It's always going to be different. Nothing's ever going to be the same. things are always changing, and it's always better if you embrace it rather than try to resist it, right?
Mm.
Because we're advancing in leaps and bounds, and it's really
Yeah,
important that you have that spark to learn, and you want to learn, and you want to expand your skills and your experience, and then share that with others too, right?
mm,
Because I've been here for 34 years. I'm not going to be here for another 34 years, but I'd
yeah.
like the person after me, my mentee, my protege, I'd like them to, also be as interested in this platform as I am. So share that knowledge as well.
I really like that. And I think just like the curiosity and never stop learning. That's one that is like people say all the time. And like it always is like, oh, well, what does that really mean? But it does contribute to your success in many
It,
ways.
it really does. It really does. It sounds a little cliche, but it's absolutely true.
I love that. Well, Marna, thank you so much for being here today. That was a ton of fun. We got a lot through mainframe. So yeah, thank you so much for all the great answers, the great advice, the great insights. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Ryan. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so